So, what's going on? Mr. Thomas, I'm back. Another video, as you can see. And I quickly wanted to talk about my review of watching Chris Claremont's X-Men on Amazon Prime. Now, this is a documentary. It's not talking about how the X-Men were created, because we all know that the X-Men were created because of Stan Lee. However, we're talking about Chris Claremont's involvement of making the X-Men such a household name that they are today, from his 16-year run with Marvel Comics. And please believe, a lot of people think of Stan Lee when it comes to the X-Men, but when it comes to like some of the best stories ever written concerning X-Men, we can thank Chris Claremont for that. Took a few notes on what I liked about it, some things that stood out to me, so let's get right to it. Now, it is a 2018 documentary, this being 2023 at time of this recording. Maybe 5 years, a little too late in watching it, but hey, it is what it is. It's documentaries like this that makes me appreciate the time being put into characters like the X-Men. Now, we all know that the Avengers are the current Hollywood and household names and powerhouses that they are now. But before Avengers Mania took over, I was always an X-Men person due to the fact that with them being mutants, them being different, and being treated differently by people that just don't really care to understand them, a guy such as myself could relate to that. Being different, thinking on your own, not following the crowd, people that give you the problem. I felt more relatable with the X-Men in the sense of that these mutants, some that just don't want to have anything to do with humans at all, exactly how I am with a lot of people nowadays, versus those that still try to find their place in the world to be accepted. But these days I choose the former, but enough of that. Get to these notes. Now, one thing I will say that stuck out with me with this is the fact that Claremont, during the time of doing the X-Men series, he made a gutsy move to have Jean Grey killed off. Now, if you are not familiar with the storyline of Jean Grey becomes the Phoenix, and then later on, she becomes the Dark Phoenix after being possessed by the Phoenix Force, right? And this is one of the boldest moves because no one has ever seen a writer turn a beloved hero into a villain. And all the atrocities that Jean Grey did while under the influence of the Phoenix Force. Now, on one hand, in order for her to redeem herself or the consequences of what she did, one writer was like, hey, she can be captured by the Shi'ar Empire. They could brainwash her. She could live her life happily ever after like nothing happened. Or, in Claremont's case, she's entirely done too much bad stuff, so we could just kill her off and let the readers know that regardless of any influences that you have been under, that there are consequences for your action. You just don't get a slap on the hand and say, hey, all is forgiven. Something that I wish they would have done, and by they, I mean those at Disney and in charge of the MCU would have done and hopefully do with Wanda Maximoff's character moving forward, because stuff that she did in WandaVision and what she did in Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness, totally uncalled for. So I really wish they had a little gutsy move to do that themselves. Now, another thing that also stood out to me as well, and this is the reason as why Magneto is one of my favorite characters. People say Magneto is a villain, but Claremont made Magneto a redeemable character. This goes back to a video that I did about the art of storytelling. When you talk about a character, if they're a good guy or bad guy, or in wrestling terms, they are a face or a heel, respectively, what is the reason why they're doing what they're doing? What are their motives? Well, with Magneto, he gave us the backstory on why Magneto is the way he is. Now, you don't know the story of Magneto. Real briefly, Magneto is a Holocaust survivor, therefore making him a Jewish mutant. He survived the Holocaust, and he's seen enough horrors in his life that could traumatize anyone for a lifetime. Now, as a grown man, tried to start a family, and humans took that from him to the point where they actually murdered his family in front of him, including his daughter, who was burned alive right there in front of him. So that would be enough to send somebody over the edge and like, well, you struck me, I'm gonna have to strike you back. And I mean, and you look at it, his parallels with the character of Macbeth, done by William Shakespeare. We meet Macbeth, he's this jerk. But then later on, we see what made Macbeth tick. And also a fun note, Michael Fassbender, who portrayed Magneto in the X-Men movies, also portrayed Macbeth in a movie based off the character. Ain't that something? But what also made Magneto redeemable as a character is that he almost saw himself become the one thing that he said that he stood against. Now, he's all about defending mutant kind, but in X-Men issue 150, he almost ends up killing the young mutant Kitty Pryde. Not only does that traumatize him that he almost killed one of his own, but he almost killed a child as well. He just lost it because she had on the X-Men uniform. She was fighting alongside them, and he had to catch himself as like, nah, this is not me. Not just the fact that I almost took out one of my own, but I almost killed a child who was about as young as my daughter when I lost her. And also a side note, in the same issue, Storm warned him, if she was messed up, dude, I'm coming for you. And I'm going to go against everything that I stand for and take you out myself. To which Magneto was like, I don't blame you because I deserve it because this is not me. And that is very beautiful in that character analysis, what I like. And also should be noticed that Claremont also had cameo appearances in 2 of the live-action X-Men films. He was a gardener in X-Men The Last Stand, which was the 3rd film. And in X-Men Days of Future Past, he was an extra. He was a congressman in the background. I got to go back and rewatch it. But anyways, things that stood out to me while watching this was he didn't take these characters and make them so cookie cutter like good and evil. He made these characters relatable as an audience member reading these comic books or watching it on screen. You feel that you have a connection with these characters. Like they're more to you than just folks that you're on the outside looking in. Like you feel like you have an intimate relationship with these characters based off of the things that they're going through. I mean, 3 things that stuck out with me. Rogue, who's one of the X-Men, used to be an enemy of the X-Men. But then it was noted, you don't need to have a superhero battle. You don't need to have something that fighting for the end of the universe. You bond with that girl and you make her feel better. Yes, you was once enemies with Rogue, but she realized the error of her ways. She wants to mend for it, and you bring her in and say, okay, you're still a mutant. You did bad things. Hey, you're still one of us. You're still a mutant. You're still one of us. But just don't let it happen again. We're going to make you feel like family. Another thing that stood out was you have to give characters a sense of change without changing them so much that they violate the essence of who they are. I'll give an example of that. Being a wrestling fan, Mark Calloway, also known as The Undertaker. For 30 years, Mark Calloway, with the Undertaker gimmick, has been the dead man, the minister of the corporate ministry back during the Attitude Era. He was the American Badass, and he was Big Red Evil. But at the end of the day, he was still the Undertaker. He was still that guy in terms of being an icon of wrestling. His character evolved through time, but it was still central to him being known as The Undertaker without violating the core that made his character what it is still to this day. And finally, when it comes to the storytelling, and I wrote this down, and I loved it because it's beautiful. It has nothing to do with superheroes or villains. It has to do with race and prejudice and trying to find a home for yourself in society. With that, I took that in the sense of, unlike today's modern television that tries to shoehorn a message with this, that, and the third, the X-Men tackled these issues without feeling the need to push an agenda on somebody. Yeah, it centered it around uh, stories of conflict, of good and evil at times, but it also brought in that sense of what is the bigger picture at hand? What are the bigger stakes is at hand? Yeah, we're different. Yeah, we're different. And regardless if we fight for right or fight against it, we're still mutants and the world is still going to look at us differently. And to be honest with you, and by the way, that quote that I just read right there is what he used to give to those guys at Fox Studios before they did the first X-Men film that came out in 2000. And they rolled with it, said we love it. And hey, like I say, the rest is history. In watching this documentary, this just goes to show that this man had passion for these characters. Again, Stan Lee created these characters, but he took them and elevated them to where they are today. And I really, really hope that with the X-Men finally coming to the Marvel Cinematic Universe with Phase 5 moving forward, I really hope that whoever's in charge at Disney, execs, writers, whatever, they take a page of the Claremont's book, or they could bring Claremont in and give insight on how to make these characters great and redeemable and memorable and just overall relatable the way that they were intended to be made. So yeah, if you haven't checked out that documentary, give yourself a chance to look at it. I loved it. It was beautiful how everything was talked about in it. And hey, till next time, see you on the next one.